What's up guys, welcome back to the channel. I'm Josh. Today we're going to be talking about The Exorcist Believer. This is a rated R horror film that is directed by David Gordon Green. This is a direct sequel to the original 1973 film titled The Exorcist. A movie that honestly I would say is kind of a horror masterpiece. It is definitely one of the best, if not the greatest horror film of all time. I mean, it was so shocking and controversial. It was a huge deal in the 70s. I of course wasn't alive during that time. But even just knowing that it was so disturbing to a lot of people that there were walkouts in the theater and things like that happening is pretty damn interesting. So I was kind of curious to see what they would do with this since it skips over all of the sequels. I've seen The Exorcist 2 and 3. 2 is an utter pile of shit. 3 was actually pretty damn good. I guess there are 2 more. I think they might be prequels or something. I'm not entirely sure, but I haven't bothered to check those out. And being that this is directed by David Gordon Green, I was actually really curious to see what he would bring to the table. I know this is not a popular opinion, but I actually kind of enjoyed all 3 of his Halloween films. They may not form a cohesive whole, but I think each individual film did its own unique things, and I really like that he tried to do more than just make a slasher movie. There were themes and undertones, even if they weren't executed super well, because he does come from a more indie, drama, comedic background. And I'll say this, the movie does start out pretty strong. It introduces us to these 2 young girls who are friends and their parents, but it more so focuses on this one young girl, Angela, and her father, Victor, played by Leslie Odom Jr. And what I liked is that it starts out pretty character-driven. We're given some backstory for Victor that's actually pretty tragic, and the relationship between him and his daughter is pretty endearing. You just see their daily life as something that could be real, which is weird to say because I know a lot of people think that David Gordon Green makes characters who are just totally stiff and wooden. But in the first act, I was invested. One day, Angela and her friend Catherine go missing out in the woods, and they're gone for 3 days. Eventually, they're found. But for the first 40 minutes or so, this is a missing persons movie, and it does a really good job of portraying the paranoia that a parent would feel in this situation. But after the girls are found, it's basically The Exorcist 1 all over again, with a few twists, none of which really add anything that make it worth watching this. For instance, there are 2 possessed girls in this one instead of 1. That doesn't really add much to it though. Instead, it just leaves the movie feeling more unfocused because we do see a lot of Angela and Victor, but Catherine's family is very underused to the point where you're like, I don't really know what's going on with these people. They're there, they're present in most of the scenes in the film, but I don't know what's going on in their minds and how they're coping with the situation. And I wouldn't consider this to be a spoiler because it's mentioned in the trailer, but in this film, they bring in, instead of just 1 or 2 exorcists, priests, they bring in people from all sorts of different religions, essentially forming this giant team of people that are going to perform this exorcism in the 3rd act, and it came off as really cheesy. I'll say this, the performances were pretty good across the board. I mean, Leslie Odom Jr. is great, again, especially in the 1st act when he's trying to portray this father who is just reeling from a lot of things in his past, but also dealing with the fact that his child has been missing for a few days. The girls were pretty creepy too. I genuinely thought the facial expressions they were making were pretty twisted and disturbing at times. Also some pretty solid practical makeup. Ann Dowd puts out another great performance as this nurse who lives next door to Victor. And her backstory is actually a little bit interesting until the movie spells it out for you and treats the audience like idiots. Oh yeah, Ellen Burstyn is in this one too, for about 15 minutes. You could honestly remove her from the script and nothing would change. Also, they take her character in a really weird direction. Staying spoiler-free, of course, but they do some things with her character that I feel were supposed to be fan service, and it just left me asking the question, why? From the trailer, I thought she was going to be to this movie what Jamie Lee Curtis was to Halloween 2018, but here it just feels like she was shoehorned in for no apparent reason. She has done things in between the original Exorcist movie and this one that I feel are out of character and don't really fit the narrative. And at the end of the day, this movie just really tanked around the midpoint. That's when it became really apparent to me that this had nothing truly scary to offer that isn't just a reskin of something in the original. There are a lot of visual nods and references to the original, and I don't feel that they were there from a sincere standpoint. They were really just there so they could put them in the trailer and entice people to come and see this, when in actuality, what they represent is a complete lack of originality and creativity. It's such a shame too, because early on, I feel like there were some effective scares and tension when you could tell that the possession was still early stage and the girls were just acting slightly off, and the parental concern that you're witnessing. There was actually a little bit of suspense in some of those scenes, but all of this just builds to a 3rd act train wreck that I couldn't stand. It rivals Insidious: The Red Door for having some of the least payoff in a horror movie ending that I've seen this year. Whatever themes about faith and community that are in this get totally thrown out the door in the ending. Also, there's a character who gives a monologue in the third act that I think contains some of the most self-important dialogue I have heard in a long time. It's the kind of stuff where this movie it thinks its ending is so profound when in reality it's just dumb and anticlimactic. I know it's unfair to compare this to a bona fide horror classic like the original, but if you're gonna make another Exorcist movie, you need to put more effort into the originality department. Adding more possessed girls and more exorcists just doesn't work. More isn't better by default. I didn't hate this movie. It wasn't snooze-inducing. It was just derivative and honestly pretty aimless, especially with that ending. If they maybe stuck the landing in the last 20 minutes, I could probably give this a higher score, but I'm gonna go with 2 out of 5 for The Exorcist Believer. This is supposedly supposed to be the first of a new trilogy of Exorcist films, but I don't think they can do here what they did with Halloween. I don't know that this will really make enough money at the box office to be successful. And quite frankly, I kind of hope it doesn't. We need more originality. We don't need more possession films, especially one in an existing franchise that didn't need to be a franchise in the first place, because the original is a masterpiece in and of itself. So those are my thoughts on the movie. Be sure to let me know down in the comments. I want to know what you guys are thinking of this. Is it just a soulless cash grab? As always, be sure to hit that like button and subscribe if you want to see more content like this, and I'll catch you guys in the next one. See you later.